In a world where men are told to chase success, one voice dares to remind them what truly matters. Faith, family, focus. From the quiet moments of fatherhood to the battles that forge your purpose, this is where strength meets wisdom. Welcome to the Everyday Dad Evolved podcast.
Hey guys, I'm Charles. I am a husband, a father, and the creator of the Everyday Dad Evolved podcast. I felt like God was leading me into creating this podcast. He's been talking to me for a couple of years, I feel like, about creating a podcast for dads or parents in general, but primarily focused on dads. And so a few years ago, actually, I hit rock bottom. I lost my job, and I think most men go into full on panic mode and start trying to figure out how am I going to provide, where do I get money, how I need to get another job, I got to do this, I got to do that, and I think a lot of people don't realize the weight that we carry as fathers and as men, and carrying on that weight of financial responsibility. But I also had to deal with the fear, I guess, really, that I wasn't enough for my family, that I couldn't be the everything that they needed to be, and that's a hard place to be in. When you finally realize that you can't be everything for everybody, and you feel the soul crushing that is, because it is, and and it's a crushing of our ego as men, and our crushing of our ability to provide, and realizing who our source comes from. Um, you know, this is where God really started speaking to me in this moment of trust and like of He's not abandoning me. He's not leaving me myself. He's refining me like fire, like silver in a fire. As you continue to refine silver and you burn away the impurities, it starts to become mirror like. So you start mirroring Christ versus mirroring what the world says of men and what's good and what's bad. Um, so this podcast is going to be about that journey, about growing stronger in faith, building new skills, and leading our families with purpose. Um, so that's welcome to the Everyday Dad Evolved um, podcast. So we're just going to kind of go through some of these points and talk through them. Um, and as this grows and I get more comfortable, it will expand on topics and do other things. So let's just dive right in. Like I said, the last actually couple of years, I've lost my job several times, and it's been each time it's a little harder to deal with. The first time I had just gotten promoted, I just got back from a business trip, and I lost my job. They gave me a small severance package and told me, thanks, find a new job. So that was fun. I searched for a long time. It felt like to find a new job. And then when I came back around, I got hired back by the same company that let me go the first time into a position for tech. And I was excited about it, but it was not everything it was advertised to be. I'm finding that fewer jobs are what they're advertised to be. Um, so I struggled with the job. I had to put in long hours. And they took away our work from home days to where we had to work in the office 5 days a week, and that was not fun because I had already built a life around being home part of the week with a family and working that way. Um, and it just became a real struggle to continue to work in the office 5 days a week, and that takes a toll on you as a husband and a father when you're spending majority of your time in the office now instead of at home. And after that, I was miserable. I was looking for another job. I got hired by another company, and I really enjoyed working there. And I really thought that was the place I was going to be. And over the course of 10 months I was there, told I was doing a good job, and I didn't have any, didn't have any write ups, didn't have anything going on, and then wham! One day I'm being told that they have a problem with my performance, and then by the end of that same week, they're like, "Hey, we're letting you go." You know, a whole bunch of details that go into what they gave to me, but they gave me a nice package, and you know, um, they at least did that. But in that moment, um, I think that is what I felt the shift inside of me go from being afraid to knowing that God would provide. Has it been easy? No. God has done some serious crushing of me as a man and as a father in the last, I want to say, month that, I've been working through this. He's brought to light some things that I was hiding that I shouldn't have been um, in regards to our finances to my wife. Um, and, it's not been a fun experience. Um, so let that just be a lesson that, when you try to control everything, God can't do the things that He wants to do. So I've slowly been learning that I can't control everything. And as I've done that, God has started to rebuild me in my faith and in my spirit from the inside out. And He's reminding me of dreams and things that He's given me in the past to work on and build from. So I can be a better father and I can be a better husband. I'm still working through that process. I'm still doing some healing with my wife and working through what that looks like and how to be more transparent in our money and where it goes and what we spend it on. When we leave our wives in the dark, man, it creates a distance and it creates a boundary there, a barrier for intimacy and for just closeness that unfortunately, money is a huge cause of divorce in society, and that I think me as the provider for my family, I was just worried of the opinion that my wife and my son would have of me, knowing like where we were and what we were spending money on and stuff. So that I never really talked about it. I just managed and did the best that I could, and made up the difference when we fell short. And it just living paycheck to paycheck sucks. I'm just gonna say that. Um, So, and I think during this struggle and during this time, God's really starting to use it as a tool to break me down and reforge me into a better man, into the man that I'm supposed to be, into the father and the husband that I'm meant to be, and into the follower of Christ that I'm meant to be. Romans tells us that He works all things together for our good. Um, so, working through that process and learning how to do that is hard in the trusting, when God is really, really drilling down on things and really highlighting things and convicting you of things that you didn't even know you were dealing with, but that are there, that are causing hindrances to other people and to your in your house and in your life. And I am learning like things that I've tolerated in the past aren't aren't supposed to be tolerated. And so, there's been a shift in my spirit, and there's been a shift in that. I even feel in the atmosphere of the nation and the world today of the heaviness of things and how, God is orchestrating something on a global scale. And us men have a vital role to play in that. And I think until we become the men we're supposed to be and take up our mantle, there's going to be a hole. For far too long, I think we as men, especially in America, have abdicated our role as the leaders of our home and as the priests of our home. Um, and so our families suffer because we're not taking leadership where we should be leading our families. And that there's so much that we have to fix. And America is soul sick because its men have become weak. And there's a famous saying that weak men make hard times, and that's so true because the in general the men in America are weak men. We are very instant gratification, worn down, distracted men who God is calling out to pick up our mantle and pick up our cross and carry it and become the men that we need to be so that our families and our nation and our communities even are are impacted for a positive way. So you need to be in your Bible, you need to be in your word, you need to have a prayer life, you need to have financial responsibility or uh, fiscal responsibility. You need to be doing the things in order for God to move you into different realms. I always talk about being a thermostat over a thermometer because a thermostat changes the world around you. It doesn't just read the temperature, it sets the temperature, whereas a thermometer is just reading the temperature. And I think God is calling a, a, a the men of the church to become thermostats and start setting the temperature in our communities, in our families, and just in our churches where we need to pick up the things that God has told us to do and stop being lazy and stop abdicating our role as leaders to other people and to women when God has called us to be the leaders. And I'm not that I'm not saying that women aren't leaders and can't be that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying though is for far too long the men have not done their duty, have not done their their divine calling as men and as husbands to lead their family and to lead their wives well. There's so much in the Bible where it tells us the impact that men has on families and what our roles and our responsibilities are. I think that for far too long we've just not paid attention to that and not realized what we need to get done. We have to get done. So I and saying all that, I'm building this podcast, and this is the first episode just of my introduction of what I'm working on. Um, is that men, we can build wealth, we can build wisdom, and we can build our purpose, but we don't have to lose our soul in the process. You know, um, in Malachi 3:3, it says, "He will sit as refiner and purifier of silver." So, God is talking about how He will refine us. He will remove the dross from our life, and as we become more consistent in our walks with Him, with our prayer lives with Him, and we ask for forgiveness from our families and from our communities and from the church at large, and we have humility about that. God will rebuild the men of the families, of the church, of the communities, and of the nation into a force to be reckoned with because we will be sold out on fire men for God who are walking in His way and where He's leading and not going our own way and doing our own thing. I think that's a big problem in today's nation as well. Men for far too long have had no boundaries. We're allowed to do whatever we want to do because we're men. And that's not the way that God orchestrated His people and His church. We are men to lead and to abide by His standards and the people that He places in authority over us and obey them and work in that process. And I don't think that we as men have done a good job of doing that or modeling that for our children. And in turn, that has become a epidemic of itself because it was modeled for us, and then we're modeling it for our children, and they will model it for their children. But God is going to break a cycle with this generation of men. I 100% believe that God is calling us to break that generational cycle in this generation. That we will be a group of men of different breed, of more solid foundation. We will be able to love our wives well, love our families well. We will be meek men who are not weak, but understand that we have the ability to mete out discipline and justice when we need to, but we understand that that's not every time that needs to be done. That is what it means to be meek, is to have violence under control. The ability to perform violence, but know when to apply it and when not to. I think too many men forget that. So, as I'm rambling on in this podcast, I just really wanted to just make a start of where I'm at, what I'm working on, and introduce the Everyday Dad Evolved podcast to you. Um, my plan is to continue to work through things and air this once a week, and even at some point have guests on the show, fellow dads, other people that I can, as the podcast grows, and I can get involved in. We can have a conversation about what it means to be men of God in today's society, how we are men in the marketplace, and how we are men at home, and how we lead in both places with a godly unction, and how we can make an impact for Jesus in a way that is supportive of who we are as men, and brings honor and glory to Jesus, and not make it awkward or weird. It's just, relationships and brotherhood, and building those bands of brothers that you can have around you, that you can uphold you and you can uphold them, and they hold you accountable to the things that you're working on and the things you're working through, and it be a safe place. And I think that's a long, long time coming. I think men are so worried about being appeared weak in front of other men that we forget that it's okay to have accountability and have the conversation, the hard conversation about where are you, what are you struggling with, what can I pray for you about, what can I ask you about to hold you accountable and keep you on track. I think for far too long the men have not been true to that, and I think the women honestly do a better job of that than men do. I think that's because women are better at sharing their feelings and sharing where they're at and being vulnerable, where men are not. Men tend to be lone wolves, and we can't continue that pattern of behavior and expect change to happen in our families, in our communities, in our churches, in our nation. We have to become men of His presence and carry that with us into different places, and be able to ask the tough questions and be able to ask for accountability when we're struggling. When 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 a man comes to you and asks, "Hey, I need you to check on me," especially when this situation happens or this is going on, "I need you to check in with me periodically to make sure I'm okay." That tells me that man is smart enough to realize that if he has built-in accountability, or if he has built that in for himself, he will less likely to be inclined to commit something he can't come back from, something that he's not going to be able to recover from, or that's going to hugely detriment his family or damage his family. So that is a man that I would be proud to call friend, and am proud to call friend. I have men in my life that are like that, that will check in with me periodically, ask me how I'm doing, what I'm working on, what's going on. Um, we don't do it often enough, and I need to be better about that myself, and be more proactive, and ask, for those men to check on me and to check in with me and meet with them regularly. I think that's another thing that we've lost as a church and as men, is those monthly men's breakfasts or monthly prayer things, and that kind of stuff. I don't see that a whole lot anymore. And I think that needs to be brought back as well because it's, I saw a statistic the other day that was talking about when the mom gets saved, it's like there's a 17% chance or 7% chance the rest of the family will get saved. But when the father comes to know Jesus as his Lord and Savior, there's a 93% chance that the family will follow. That should tell you how impactful men are upon the family and upon the communities that they are involved in. When good men step up and do the right things, evil cannot flourish. And we need more good men to stand up and do the right things so that way we can turn this country around and turn our communities around and father the fatherless and be a resource and a help to those in need. Um, so, that being said, guys, um, this is again the Everyday Dad Evolved podcast. We're forged in faith, built for a purpose. Until next time, I hope that you are blessed. And so I want to leave you with a challenge for this week. Find 10 minutes of stillness, no phone, no noise, just prayer, and ask God, what are you trying to refine in me right now? And be honest and real with yourself. God bless. Have a great day, guys.
Because becoming a better man isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, one lesson at a time. The Everyday Dad Evolved podcast, forged in faith, built for purpose. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, subscribe, leave a review, and follow Charles on TikTok and Instagram.